Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Tuesday at about 9:48. So yesterday or this weekend was Martin Luther King weekend. So yesterday was a day off for me and for lots of people in the United States here. So the weather was the weather overall here this winter has been pretty bad with the flooding. It's been kind of an awful start to the new year in a lot of ways, weather wise especially. But yesterday was a nice kind of relief. It was actually kind of a sunny day, blue skies, so it was nice to be out. And I went to Goodwill down in Rockland, and I bought some movies. Surprise, surprise! And I bought a few albums there, a few CDs. I always say, Bull Moose is my main place to go to, and then when it comes to like close or local places to buy movies, I go to Goodwill in Rockland all the time, and I've gotten some killer movies there. And so yesterday I was there. I got some movies, got some albums that are really cool, and one of the movies I picked up that this show is going to be about, and that is Ridley Scott's Prometheus. So this is a movie. I feel like there's a lot to talk about with this movie. So I picked this up. I got this. It was $3 on DVD. It would have been cool to get this on Blu-ray, for obvious reasons. But I figure, what the hell? I will get this movie anyway. It's only $3. So I've actually seen this movie quite a few times. For And it's interesting. I have a pretty strange relationship with this movie. I kind of have a long history with it, and the whole reason that I decided to do a show about this movie, and really the whole thing, it started around Christmas time, where I watched this movie called Don't Breathe, that was directed by Fede Alvarez, who is an amazing director and writer. He's done some really great films. He is, I think, a really great figure in kind of modern horror, in the modern horror world. I watched Don't Breathe around Christmas time, and I forgot. Oh, yeah, that's Fede Alvarez. Okay, I definitely know who he is. So I watched that film, and I was like, oh, okay. I had seen Don't Breathe originally in the theater. Really, really liked that movie. I actually really love that movie. And so I had watched it around Christmas time during the break, and then it was like 2 or 3 days after seeing that movie. And again, it was probably my third or fourth time watching that film. I So about 3 or 4 days later, I was online and I saw this news come up about there being a new Alien movie coming out, and it's coming out in August of this year, and it's called Alien Romulus. And I was like, what is that about? And then I saw that it's written and directed by Fede Alvarez. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. And at first I was like pretty dismissive of it, wasn't really excited by it. But when I saw that it was a Fede Alvarez movie, the movies he has done, he's written them and also directed them. So he has a lot of creative control over his work. But I was like, huh, okay, that's kind of interesting. And then I was unaware. I figured the Alien franchise was probably dead at that point. So I was very surprised that there was going to be a new one. But I was kind of, after a day or two of seeing that headline, I was like kind of interested because Fede Alvarez was attached to it. So I did a show on Don't Breathe, and also its sequel, which is a just a horrible movie. I don't recommend the sequel. Fede Alvarez, I think, produced it, but he didn't direct it, he didn't write it, and it really shows. It's just a movie that is just kind of unwatchable. It's a terrible, terrible movie. But anyway, so I did a review for Film Fanatic where I talked about both movies. And during that time I realized, wait, he also made the Evil Dead remake quite a few years ago. I have not seen that movie. I remember that movie being just amazing. So that week I watched Evil Dead, and I had bought the Evil Dead remake on Blu-ray a couple of years ago, and I had never watched it for some reason. I've only seen the Evil Dead remake. I probably had only seen it twice up until that point. So I watched it since I'm thinking about Fede Alvarez, and I did these reviews about his movie. I was thinking about Alien. I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch Evil Dead, and I watched it, and I was just completely blown away by what an incredible movie that it is. It really is. There are some great remakes in the world of horror. I think for me, one that I was really late to the game, and had a lot of mixed things to it, but now I think it's just simply amazing, is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. I just totally love that movie, and also the beginning. I've fallen in love with those movies, and I think the Evil Dead remake is just as good, if not, for all intents and purposes, I would say it's probably the greatest remake ever made. And it's something, it's very unique. It pays homage to the original source material, of course, by Sam Raimi. It does a really great job of paying homage to that. But the thing that's so cool about that movie is just how, well, it's just down and dirty. It's super nasty. Fede Alvarez has a way about his films where his movies are just really raw and just kind of like, he'll go to places that are kind of unexpected, and he'll like push the boundaries, the thresholds. And I was like, this movie is incredible. So I did a review of Evil Dead, and I'm like, why have I not watched this movie more often? And the Blu-ray version of the film that I have is just incredible. So after watching it, I was like, wow, okay, I'm really excited about. I generally got super excited by the news of the new Alien movie that's coming out, Romulus. And I watched an interview with Fede Alvarez, and he was saying how the film has been wrapped for a while. And there is a cut of the film. I think it's like a director's cut or what have you. And apparently he showed, in this interview, he was talking about how he met with Ridley Scott and showed him it and wanted to know his reaction, for good or bad. And he said that he was very, nervous about it, obviously, because, Ridley Scott is brutally honest. He kind of comes across as a pretty angry guy a lot of the times when he's reacting towards like fans or, reviews. He takes things personal, and he does target people. The one example of that, and again, he's Ridley Scott, and he kind of does have a legendary career, especially in the beginning of his career. I mean, he directed some incredible movies. I mean, Alien, Blade Runner. I really love Gladiator, actually. Legend. I mean, he's made some killer movies. The Duelist, amazing. But he's also, I think, made some really bad movies. He has a very mixed bag when it comes to a career, at least I think, where it's all over the place. And I'm not sure what that's about. He doesn't really. I kind of feel like Ridley Scott, as great as he was, his career is all over the place. And I think, like, arguably, I think he hasn't really made a good movie since, The Martian, which is a good movie, actually a very good movie. He had directed this other movie called The Last Duel with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, which is actually a pretty good movie. I would like to see it again. But that movie really bombed in the box office. And I did see that movie and I was surprised by how actually pretty good it is. And it came out probably about 2 years ago. But Ridley Scott, the movie bombed in the box office, and Ridley Scott basically attacked his fans and his audience. He gave this interview right around that time where he basically, more or less called out people for not going to see his movie, and that people are, just glued to their phones. They don't give a shit about art, and he really trashed people. And, in some ways, I kind of agree with him to a degree, but I also feel the way he went about it was dead wrong, and he came across as a real pompous, arrogant, for all intents and purposes, asshole. Especially with saying, targeting the very people that he wants to come to his films. It was kind of a ridiculous situation. And that came out, he gave this interview right around that time. And he's come out, and Blade Blade Runner 2049, which I actually really love, which is the sequel to Blade Runner, directed by one of my favorite directors, Denis Villeneuve. He came out and more or less said he did not like that film, and he really, kind of not badmouthed it, but he had a lot of negative things to say, which I thought was, he can be honest, but it was strange. It was very strange, and I think it had an effect on the box office of that movie. So he's got a reputation for being kind of a hard ass, kind of an angry old man, and kind of a curmudgeon, kind of a pissed off guy. And some people will excuse it. Well, they'll say, "Well, he's a legend. He should be able to say what he wants." And I agree. I agree with that. Even Fede Alvarez says that. But I agree with that. But I also feel like you have to have some kind of responsibility too. Especially when you're in a position of power. And that's, why everything is fucked up, because anybody who's in the position of power, there is no fucking responsibility. My favorite quote from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And I don't think he has that at all. Neither do most people who are in charge of these, big affairs. But anyway, but at the same time, he should be allowed to speak his mind and be who he wants to be. And, he'll be tried and convicted by his very words. But at the end of the day. So, he said, Fede Alvarez had said in this interview that Ridley Scott actually he basically said he was blown away by Romulus. He said it was an amazing film. And so, on one hand, that's kind of encouraging, and on one hand, it's kind of like, well, look at Ridley Scott's track record, and I mean this in no disrespect to Ridley Scott, because he's directed some of my favorite films of all time, Alien and Blade Runner. I mean, two absolute masterpieces in my mind, two of my favorite movies of all time. So just that alone, So, but at the same time, that was a long fucking time ago. Those movies came out, closing in on almost, 50 years ago. So, it says a lot. So, with all of this stuff kind of going on in my head and thinking about Alien and Ridley Scott, I came across Prometheus. So I was like, okay, I want to watch this. And thinking about the Alien universe and thinking about, the whole, everything that entails. And I've had mixed things about this movie. I remember I saw this movie, I've seen this movie actually quite a few times. It's one of those movies that you feel like I don't know, you kind of feel like you were anticipating it so much that you were kind of making yourself like it, and being in some sort of state of denial around the movie, where you look at the movie for me, where it just looks, it gets in the way of just looking at the movie at face value and just engaging in the experience of the movie. And that kind of preconceived notion where I'm like, oh, I've been wanting to see this movie forever, and this could answer some really interesting questions. This could be really amazing. This could really be, the continued work of a true filmmaking master. All of these things. So I kind of went into this film with that mindset, and I remember seeing it in the theater when it came out, and it's crazy how long this film has been out. It came out in 2012. It's crazy. And I remember going to see it in the theater. And I had a lot of mixed things about it. There were certain aspects of the film that I liked, certain concepts that were introduced to this film. But I had a lot of mixed feelings about it. And I'm going to get into that in the show. And then a couple of years later went by, and then I saw it again on DVD, had that same reaction. And then I watched it one time on Blu-ray. I rented it once or twice on Blu-ray, and there were certain things that stood out to me that I actually kind of enjoyed a little bit more. Where I was almost leaning into the area of saying that I actually like this movie. And so fast forward to yesterday, and I came across this at Goodwill, so I figured I'm going to watch this. And while I was watching this, I should say, lately I've been watching, and I've started watching, I'm almost done with the first season, and I think it's just utterly fantastic, and I want to continue watching it. But I started watching the Game of Thrones series. I had only made it to maybe the second season when it originally aired, but I never finished it. And I have talked a lot about in the past on how when it comes to TV shows, there's some really amazing TV shows, but I think the longer ones for me, I just have, even if they're just exceptional, I have such a hard time watching them because of the length. I love movies because it's like one and done. It's like a conclusive thing, and you don't have to watch it for 1 million hours. Even if the writing is so great. So that was and it seems daunting and intimidating. So, but it is a show I've been wanting to get to. So I've been watching it, and I'm really, really enjoying it. I think it's incredible. I'll eventually do a show on the Game of Thrones series. But in the midst of it, I went shopping and I got Prometheus. This was one of the movies I picked up. So I was like, again, thinking a lot about the Alien movies. And I finished up one or two of the discs of Game of Thrones last night. So I was like, okay, I'm going to watch Prometheus now. So my head had been in the Game of Thrones world for a long time. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to change things up. And I put in Prometheus. And the whole premise of Prometheus is basically it's a prequel to the Alien movie. When this film was announced, I was beyond ecstatic and so curious and so excited to watch this movie. The idea that Ridley Scott of him coming back to the Alien franchise initially was kind of mind blowing, and then the idea that this was going to be something new and very, very different, but yet it was going to be a prequel to one of the greatest, if not the greatest, horror science fiction movie ever made, Alien, which came out in 1979. The whole origins of this movie was going to be more or less about the space jockey. In Alien, which is focused on the truckers in space scenario, the workers that discover that who inhabit the Nostromo go to this planet to investigate this distress signal. They come across this ship, and they come across this being called, which has been known or becomes known as the space jockey. And basically, what the space jockey is in the alien universe is there's some giant alien creature that has been that apparently was taken over by another alien form, where, and when they come across the space jockey, you see that the stomach and the body of this alien creature, of the space jockey, was like imploded, like something exploded out of it, and that's what you're left with. And so this Prometheus movie was going to be about that, but then the kind of the origins of where the xenomorph, the alien creature, came from, and how it developed, how it became this perfect killing machine. So Prometheus was supposed to be more or less an explanation of that, but it was also going to be about, at the same time, it was supposedly going to be about other things, other themes, and dealing with the concept, well, the very title itself, Prometheus being the Titan that questions God, and wants to have the same power as God, and gets expelled for that. Prometheus was a concept and God that was embraced by Mary Shelley, and the whole Frankenstein mythology. It's all part of that. So again, I was very, very excited about this movie, especially when it came out. But I have to say, I have had all kinds of mixed feelings about Prometheus. And so I watched it in the middle of watching this really, really high end, incredible movie or series, Game of Thrones. Like something where the writing is so great, the direction is just impeccable. It's just amazing. So well done, so well crafted. And I put Prometheus in, and it's been a couple of years since I watched it, and I honestly could not make it all the way through. I really think that Prometheus is just it's utterly just uh, a disaster of a movie. It's so bad. It's so bad. And I'm like, why did it take me so long to just admit to myself this movie is such a piece of trash? And again, I attribute it because I've been wanting to embrace this movie for so long. I've given it chances. I've seen things in the film, in Prometheus, that in concepts and ideas that I thought were really good. There were certain aspects of the film that I thought were good. As a whole, there were many problems I had with it. But still, I'm like, after watching it last night, and I come to this realization, and I could not make it all the way through it, where I'm like, this movie is just so incredibly bad. It's just terrible. And I'm like, I couldn't, I got about an hour and 10 minutes or so into it. And I was like, I got so frustrated and kind of angry that I just took the movie out. And I was like, fuck this. And I threw back in Game of Thrones, and I'm like, okay, this feels great. And it was just like so obvious. It's so blatant to me that really terrible writing, really terrible direction, really great direction, really superb writing. It was so obvious to me. And I watched it in the state of where I had no anticipation. I watched it totally cold. There was no preconceived notions. I just watched it for what it was as a movie. And this movie is again, it's so bad. I kind of equate this movie to being almost as bad, if not as worse. I compare this to The Phantom Menace, which was the prequel for the Alien for the Star Wars series. And the things that were just so bad about this film, I think, and again, it's such a tough thing because the cast for Prometheus is kind of incredible. You have Charlize Theron, who I love, who I think is just an amazing actress. You have Idris Elba, who I just think is fantastic. You know, he's one of those actors that can be in a crappy movie, but usually he is so good. He's got such great screen presence. He's got all kinds of attributes, as well as Charlize Theron, which I think, I think she's one of the best actors of her generation. It's got Michael Fassbender, another fantastic actor. Naomi Rapace, who is just an amazing actress, the girl with the dragon tattoo. Really, really great. But their characters are just terrible. The direction for this movie is just terrible. I really feel that there would be, if you took the flesh and blood versions of these actors and you took, and I mean this literally, if you took a cardboard cutout of these actors, it would be just as good, because there's zero. Prometheus there's like zero tension, you know, going into this movie. There's not real, like, you get this explanation, you get the drive of as to what this movie is kind of about, but there's no tension. You get introduced to all of these characters right away. There's a whole ship filled with all of these characters that are going on this mission, this to explore this excavation site. And I feel like not one person in the cast, not one character really illuminates any kind of life or any. You have no. I could care less about any of the characters. There was no tension. There was no likable quality to any of the characters. I didn't really care about them. They were all just there. They were all just there. There were times in this dialogue, for the dialogue, that I feel for Prometheus that it was legitimately cringeworthy, where I was like, who wrote this script? Was this written by some 13-year-old girl? Or boy? Some of the references in the dialogue and just some of the overall dialogue in the film is just so incredibly generic and so badly executed, and just dumb, like just so bad. And the whole tone of the film, of what this mission's going to be, everything, like, again, it does not feel like there's no suspense, there's no gravitas, there's no feeling of being pulled in to what the story is going to be. It's just kind of there, and it just kind of washes over you. And it's just like a very sterile experience. And it's testimony that you can have an amazing cast like this movie has, but if the writing isn't good, if the direction isn't good, it's going to just fall flat on its ass, and every time. It doesn't matter. Nobody can save a really bad script or a really poorly or terribly executed movie from a direction standpoint. It's impossible. And this is an example of that. And those things really stood out to me more than ever. And I think it's in the comparison in my brain, watching something like Game of Thrones, where it's like really, really high quality. You care about everyone on the screen. Everything is. You're invested in everything. The stakes are high. You care about everything that you're seeing, and you're in this universe. And then you switch to this universe that is Prometheus, and you see. For me, it was like so blatantly obvious how flawed and how terrible this movie really is, and I couldn't watch it. And the thing that And the biggest criticism that I've always had about Prometheus, and it's something that always, even when I had doubts and I'm like, well, there's certain things about this movie that I like or this or that. The biggest glaring aspect of this film that makes absolute no sense in any way, shape, or form is kind of the world, the consistency of the world of Alien or the Alien franchise. One of the coolest aspects of Alien, directed by Ridley Scott, and also James Cameron's sequel, which I think is probably the greatest sequel ever made in film history. The whole idea of what Ridley Scott created is this the concept of truckers in space, right? And Ridley Scott has said many, many times in many interviews over the years, the biggest influence for him for making the first Alien movie, the movie that had the biggest influence on him was Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which came out in '74, which is the greatest, one of the greatest movies ever made. And it's so incredibly dirty and nasty and raw and just terrifying. But it's so raw. And that movie had the biggest influence on Ridley Scott for making Alien, where he wanted to have this small space where you're gonna have these small cast of this or the small ensemble cast, and there's gonna be this sense of paranoia and dread, and it's gonna be really raw and really nasty and kind of dirty and terrifying, and that's what at the core Texas is, the original Texas. Like that's what makes that movie so incredibly horrific. Even though there's virtually no gore in that movie at all, in comparison to basically, you can take any dumb ass new horror movie that comes out that is just stupid and forgettable. If you take the gore factor, say, those movies are usually 10 times more gory than, say, the original Texas. But yet Texas has that reputation as being this incredibly, you know, brutally violent, gory film when it actually isn't. It does have violence, it does have gore, but it's very subtle. You barely see anything, and the horror is all psychological, all psychological. It's all steeped in the fear and the paranoia of the characters. That's what that's the core of that movie. And because that's so strong, people are have this experience after seeing that film that they've actually seen more of those things than they actually did. And so he took that. Really, Scott took that concept and just made Alien, basically. I mean, there's obviously other references and other influences, but that's the core of what he tried to set out. And so Alien, the world, the universe itself, it's obviously science fiction based. It's set way into the future. But the thing that's so cool about it is that it does feel dirty. The whole notion of truckers in space, all the technology in the movie on the Nostromo that's being used by the characters. It's all obviously high tech and it's advanced, but it's all kind of shoddy and nothing is it's not clean. There are aspects of the technology that they're using that doesn't really work, or it's not really reliable. It's kind of broken a little bit, and everything's kind of dirty. It's kind of gritty. It's 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 got this cool balance of where it's set into the future, but technology is kind of a little bit behind of where it needs to be to a degree. Everything's a little bit broken, a little bit shoddy. Everything's not pristine and clean. It's gritty. It's kind of dirty. That's the overall atmosphere of Alien, and you get this sense of being very claustrophobic. And I think that's one of the, for me, to me, that is the greatest aspect of that film that I love. And the thing around even the Alien of where it's still like very much in step with the concept of what Toby Hooper, used for Texas or the blueprint of where less is more. That film's not very gory. Alien's not a very gory film. You don't really see the alien until the very end, and it plays in that whole idea of less is more. What you don't see often is more terrifying than what you actually do see. It leaves a lot up to your imagination. I mean, so much, it's so focused on that. And it does just an absolute masterful job of that. James Cameron, with the sequel to Aliens, was able to expand on that, but yet still retain that real grittiness to everything, to that universe. And it was really grounded, really so incredibly cohesive. To you can watch both of those films together, and it to me, I love both of them so much, and I've done that a few times where I've watched both of those films together, and it can act almost like one big movie. It's so cohesive. So Prometheus is supposed to be a prequel. And again, this is the biggest problem that I have with Prometheus. The biggest problem that is the aspect of this film that just automatically shuts me down into or takes me out of the movie. So Prometheus is set up where it's a prequel. It's going to takes place quite a few years before Alien, and it's supposed to give you this origin story of the xenomorph, the alien, and the origins of how this space jockey arrived. How did this other alien species? How did their ship crash, and how did they get overtaken by some other creature? And the introduction of the chest burster through the space jockey. And so it takes place quite a few years before. And the thing about Prometheus is that this movie is so incredibly pristine and clean, and the technology for that is used in this movie is so incredibly fucking over the top. Um, it's that it has there is no cohesive thread to the world of Alien or Aliens with it, because it makes no sense in any way, shape or form that story wise the technology is going to start at this incredibly high level and then it diminishes, and then by the time you get to the second and third film, it is, you know, for all intents and purposes, gone by the wayside in comparison to the introduction to the technology in Prometheus. Like, it's the technology and the special effects in Prometheus are so incredibly over the top and so incredibly ridiculous that there's no cohesive there's nothing cohesive tied to Alien at all. If this film was set maybe in the future where it's not a prequel, then yeah, I could kind of understand. I wrap my brain around it, but it's not set up that way. This movie is set up to be a prequel to Prometheus, to Alien. And so technologically it makes there's zero cohesiveness, and it makes absolute no sense in any way, shape or form as to why the technology is so advanced and then it gets diminished. And, you know, again, Alien was so great because just how raw it is and how dirty it is. Prometheus is so fucking clean. Every shot is so clean. There's no grit or dirt to anything that you see. On one hand, it does look beautiful. It is beautifully shot. There are some scenes in the film that are really great, but it lacks any grittiness to it. There's zero. Everything is so clean and pristine. Like, you feel like you can eat off the floor of every scene. And to me, that's not what the Alien movies are. They're kind of dirty. The Nostromo, the ship, and the Nostromo is kind of a dirty place. And so to me, that is the biggest aspect that automatic. I'm gone. I'm out of the movie when I see the technology used in Prometheus. And over time, after seeing this third or fourth time, like I watched it last night, all these other factors are huge reasons as to why I think this movie is just a terrible movie. And, you know, so I don't know. I don't know what to think as far as Ridley Scott's Ridley Scott. I definitely lost a little bit of respect for him over the years, and, you know, and his bloating and just his whole like demeanor. But Yeah, it's a terrible movie. It's a terrible movie, and it made me want to throw in Alien and Aliens. Like it made me want to have that experience. So I needed to do a show about this movie, Prometheus. I've had a long history, and so yeah, if anybody out there checks out this video, I know it's a longer video, but this was something I wanted to kind of talk about for a while, and it's still very fresh in my brain. But anybody out there that has seen Prometheus, please comment. I'd love to get dialogue going about this movie or the Alien, anything tied to the Alien franchise and the news of the new Alien. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.